I want to pull up one of your tweets to talk about the demoralization and the normalization of extremist rhetoric that's shifting the narratives and the opinions in this country. So you have actually, there are two tweets from you. The first, you said, step one, feds did not infiltrate the very MAGA groups they blamed for 1-6. Step two, yeah, they did, but it's not a big deal. Step three, it's a good thing, actually. And step four, people freaking out about it are the real problem.
Right.
You then quoted that and said the Tucker NSA story went from step one to step four in less than 24 hours. Now, I don't want to get completely into those stories. We will in a second. I want to bring this back to this story. Black Lives Matter Utah chapter declares American flag a symbol of hatred. And the reason I brought up your tweets is that first we saw it was Mara Gay on MSNBC saying that she was disturbed seeing these American flags in the back of these trucks. What did everyone say? She didn't mean she was disturbed by the American flag. She was talking about the people who were flying it and that they were flying it, what they were saying about the country. And they had all of this like inference that wasn't there, all this context they make up. We're moving this direction. The first step is no, she didn't. Now they're saying, well, so what if they did? Now we're actually hearing Black Lives Matter Utah put out a Facebook post saying those who fly the American flag are racists. So where are we at? The embassies are flying Black Lives Matter flags.
Right.
You're seeing certain institutions flying pride flags equal to or even above, or Black Lives Matter flags equal to or above. And we're moving in this direction. In Evanston, Illinois, they canceled the 4th of July parade over COVID, but then had Pride and Juneteenth celebrations,
right,
as if COVID was totally irrelevant. So in the previous segment, you were talking about color revolutions. Mm-hmm. I'm looking at that formula you give. Step one. And I'll put it in the context of the American flag. No, they're not saying they don't like the American flag. No, they're not criticizing the American flag. Step two, okay, well, they did, but who cares? It's just Black Lives Matter Utah. It's not even a big organization. Soon, we're going to get to the point where they're like, actually, they're making a good point, aren't they? We'll see it on MSNBC. There'll be some controversy around it, and they'll say, but they make a good point. I mean, that flag was created by these racists. And then step four, they're going to be like, how could these people defend racism? That's where we'll end up.
No, absolutely. And it's a sign. It's actually, I take this as a point of, you have to give credit to the ruling ideology. They're always on the offensive.
Right.
They're always on the offensive. And this succession of steps simply illustrates that. It's that they get what they want from the first step and they move on. They're incredibly flexible and they end up getting what they want, even when they're proven wrong because the damage is already done. And we just have to kind of understand that, recognize that, and if to the extent possible, reverse engineer it, and understanding what power is, how it's wielded, where it comes from, what its infrastructure is. That's something that needs to be just on everyone's minds who's interested in playing for keeps, which is a very rare quality these days.
The pessimism in me comes from the fact that people on the right have no organizational power. I mean, like you mentioned, exactly, they control no major institutions.
Right.
It's all the left.
Right.
Now, there is a potential light at the end of that tunnel in that you don't want to be a frog boiling in a pot. Mm-hmm. But what happens if you throw boiling water at a frog? That frog's going to be like, yo, they just threw boiling water at me. It's going to jump out of the way. Because the right has been so weak in this, there is the potential that this shocks regular people like throwing boiling water at a frog. Case in point, what Steve Bannon was saying, that these mothers are now all of a sudden getting smacked in the face by this extremism from these schools, this critical race applied principles in schools, where, if you teach the kid little bits over the course of 10 years, there's nothing a parent could do to fight back against that. The kid has been indoctrinated. But they're coming in half a year, in 1 year, and telling the kids, your parents are liars, they're evil, they're oppressors. And so now the mom says, what'd you learn in school? And the kid goes, you're evil. And they go, what? Right. Or with the Zoom classes. We have that story about the lady who gets fired for, explaining to kids how to take care of business on their own, if you know what I mean, pleasuring themselves, something the kids probably should not be exposed to. Actually, I'm going to say this. 6-year-olds should not be exposed to that. You don't have an argument about high schoolers. That was another part of the debate.
Will YouTube censor you for saying that?
No. I mean, but we have to be very, very careful. So what people need to understand about all the censorship stuff is, do we just cede this ground in this ability to communicate, just saying just going full steam ahead, or do we try and use the networks to the best of our abilities to stay in the fight?
I've been thinking a lot. It depends. So along with this metaphor, I'm thinking the culture war. If it's two armies lined up facing each other in battle, if you become demoralized in black pill, you're basically routing from the battle. You're giving up, you're turning, and you're running in the middle of combat, and you're leaving your allies open to being flanked by the people that you should have been engaged with on the other side. Now they're going to go and flank your friends. They're going to get destroyed. You're going to lose the battle. Alternately, there are times when you're realizing your army is losing the battle and you need an organized retreat. That's different than a rout. That's different than a black pill. And in cases like the education system, I think an organized retreat away from that system could be valuable.
There have been so many prominent anti-establishment YouTubers who in the past several years just dropped to their knees and said there are 5 lights, that it is particularly demoralizing to see. Because it is easier. I mean, look, man. You want to be an edgy YouTube channel. You want to get all those followers. Yeah, 8 years ago. Now you've got the establishment machine saying be assimilated, resistance is futile. And a bunch of these big channels went, you know what? It's just easier. Just easier.
Well, I mean, the internet I don't need to tell you, the internet that existed 6 years ago is not the internet we have today. It's a totally different phenomenon. So, and that's, I think, a major shift in how we need to kind of strategize about how to get the message out, how to wield power, how to organize, is that there was this brief period where we had more or less uncensored internet, and that proved to be simply too effective. And so really, I think one of the most important videos everyone should watch, Alim Bakari, I think he was on this show, and he released a video of the entire Google C-suite.
Yeah.
The day after the election, the entire C-suite just literally crying and saying, we will never let this happen again.
Yep.
And I would like to talk about big tech, because I do have some kind of different takes on that. I think might be interesting to your audience about what it actually is. So
this is, I guess, just, I'm not trying to be overly pessimistic. We try to keep a little bit of a balance because we've been very pessimistic in the past. But hearing the Google higher ups, they're crying, saying, "Don't worry."
Right.
I don't believe any of these people when they're like, "Oh, we're being fair." No, they're not. We are absolutely in the resistance, and I wonder. I've said on this show before that this show is basically a pressure release valve for the establishment. Like I mentioned with frogs boiling in a pot. Mm-hmm. If they nuke Steven Crowder and eliminate him off of YouTube completely, you're going to get millions of really angry people. I mean, he's getting, 50 million views per month. That's millions of people who are going to be very angry that they're being silenced or not heard, or that they're, they can't express themselves. And that could be like throwing boiling water at a frog.
Right.
So they keep channels like his on the ropes. They keep channels like mine around so that the frogs are boiling. People still listen to this. They still feel like there's some semblance of a chance, when in reality, every major institution is already under control. And if they wanted to, they could just snap their fingers and wipe us off the internet.
Right. And that's the two sides of the coin. There's the black pill and there's the cope. And
so are you saying you're pessimistic?
There's the black pill, there's the cope, but there's that very thin edge of the coin.
Of the hope?
And I think that's the line that we need to skate on. But you have to be very creative, and you have to think realistically about things. You have to understand that now the chessboard is international. And I think one thing we need to understand is the more consolidation ideologically that exists within the domestic sphere, the more we lose moral authority to exert our power geopolitically. And the stage is an international one. So the more the United States, or I call this new version of the United States, I've coined this term, the globalist American empire, which has, I think, a convenient acronym. And this is basically the globalist American empire. The more it consolidates ideologically in a domestic sense, the more it loses its prestige and its standing geopolitically. And this is what we were talking about off air about this concept of taboo arbitrage, is that, this is kind of why I take a more, I hate to use the word nuanced approach to China, but I think it's a good thing that there's a genuinely independent sphere of power that is separate from that of the globalist American empire, that is certainly authoritarian, but we're authoritarian. They're a different type of authoritarian. There are things you cannot say in China. It's not a free speech state, but they censor different things. And I think as long as there's a place in the world where you can say the things that I won't say because YouTube will get mad, as long as there's a place that you could say that, perhaps in China, as long as there's a place here where you can criticize Xi, that's a good thing. Those different taboos can be arbitraged out. And I think this general, we have to get very creative. I've caused a lot of controversy on another show. You mentioned Jack Murphy, actually. It was on his show for saying, look, all this talk about, big tech and everything, people need to understand they're focusing so much on big tech being private companies. In the ultimate sense, they're not private companies. Our big tech apparatus is an extension of our national security state in the ultimate sense. That's just the reality.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, they're not private companies in the sense that actually matters. And you see in China, they don't allow Google. They don't allow these other things. And frankly, that's to their credit. That's why they're still an independent society. And so I suggested, what if the Chinese were to set up a server farm on their territory, a bunch of servers, and say, this is going to be free speech infrastructure for Americans who want to talk about things relevant to their own countries. Okay, we grant you. We're not going to let you talk about President Xi. We're not going to let you talk about the Uyghurs. But we're going to let you talk about all the things that are actually relevant to your country, to your leadership, to your corrupt and illegitimate ruling class that your big tech infrastructure won't allow. I think that would be an absolute winning chess move. It would be good for the people in the United States who are disenfranchised, who are targeted by their own government. And frankly, it would also be a good move for China. I think it would be a win-win.
TikTok.
Well, that's a very interesting case, because we know TikTok was one of basically the only big tech companies that the Trump administration went after. Now, I'm not, necessarily a fan of TikTok. I don't use it. My general disposition toward it is negative. But TikTok, compared to Google, Facebook, all these others, TikTok is far less of a threat in terms of censoring our free speech. And in fact, in some ways, they're competitors. And so to go after TikTok first rather than Google, I think is completely ineffectual. It was the wrong move and actually serves the interests of Facebook and Google insofar as TikTok is their competitor. And as far as censorship goes, TikTok is far less censorious than Google or Facebook. And the censorship that actually does occur on TikTok is not coming from the Chinese. It's coming from their American people working in their trust and safety teams who are censoring not due to Chinese sensitivities, but due to the same old, crap in America.
Is Telegram? Is that Russian or?
Telegram is Russian. It's created, I believe, by a Russian national called Pavel Durov, but it has a complicated relationship with the Russian government. It's not. And so Durov is a Russian national, I believe, but he's not living in Russia. And so it's not as though he's simply kowtowing, doing what Russia wants, although he does hand over data. But, all tech companies, basically, all the major ones hand over data. So that's not to single him out.
The challenge with, if China were to set up this server farm, allowing people to say whatever they want.
Right.
You'll still get the U.S. intelligence apparatus using sock puppet accounts to manipulate people. That's basically where one person will operate 50 accounts to simulate public opinion.
Oh, absolutely. No. And this is why I think that's such an interesting exercise. I say it not half jokingly. There is a seriousness, but I think it's just such an interesting exercise because it's outside of the scope of what most people strategize and talk about when they think of the free speech problem. And it really goes to show, like what you're saying, your response to that, it's in spirit extremely accurate. And it underscores what I was saying, is that big tech is an extension of our national security state. And people need to understand that the bottleneck to free speech infrastructure is not that, Mark Zuckerberg just isn't, liberal enough in terms of free speech, or these individual people aren't open enough to free speech. They have to understand that if any robust free speech infrastructure were to be created in the United States at scale, it would be targeted as a national security threat.
That's what happened with TikTok. And I think, and they use the excuse that it's collecting data from American citizens, which is empowering China.
Right.
If China were to set up server farms and said, say whatever you want to say, they're going to collect all the data.
The data thing is ridiculous. Frankly, is it really such a big difference? Like, Google has all of my data, but heaven forbid the Chi-Coms have my data, as though Google is so much better. Or, I say I would rather have the Chinese government have all of my information than any American journalist. And so people
at least they'll keep it a secret.
People just don't have the proper perspective on these things. And this is why it's like I understand in a geopolitical sense China is a threat, but ultimately the signaling power of being a China hawk has changed dramatically. A couple of years ago, to say that China is the number one threat, the signaling value of that position is to say, come on, guys, do we really need war with Iran? China's the bigger. So it really had the effect of signaling that you weren't one of these nuts that was obsessed with war with Iran, or an even bigger nut who wanted war with Russia. To say China's the big problem, basically it has a first order meaning, it has a second order signaling meaning, saying I'm not one of those Russian nuts, I'm not one of those Iran nuts. But now I think it's taken on a very different type of significance, and you see that in the fact that all of these establishment, just establishment filth, people like Nikki Haley, these neocon nut jobs, they're just China hawks like everyone else. Pompeo, even people underestimate the extent to which the Biden administration generally is China hawk, and so. The signaling power has really changed, and now I think a lot of the China hawk stuff is simply a distraction from the fact that the real enemies of the American people are not any foreign country like China. The real enemies of the American people are the people who control America.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to see the full show, come back to this channel, youtube.com/TimcastIRL, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., where you can leave comments and super chat, and we actually will read your comments on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you want exclusive members-only content, segments you can't get anywhere else, go to timcast.com, become a member, and we even have full bonus episodes. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.